Good morning, everyone. My name is Jordan Hart. I am the online editor with Labels and Labeling magazine, and this morning I am sitting down with Mikaela Harding. And Mikaela is going to give herself a brief introduction about who you are, what your company you're with, and what your role is there.
Thanks, Jordan. Hi, everyone. I'm Mikaela Harding. I'm technical sales support at Avery Dennison, label and packaging materials here in the UK. So I'm based just outside of Bristol, working from home, even though we're obviously all working from home in a pandemic, but normally I work from home and I travel around mainly the southwest of the UK, and I cover Ireland as well for kind of general technical support.
Wonderful. So this is a part of our Young Manager series. So I kind of want to just pick your brain about what it's been like to be a young professional, obviously in the printing industry. So what was your journey to getting into the labels industry?
I think, like most people who talk about journey into any sort of print packaging, that side of things, I fell into it. I feel like a lot of people say these things when they're talking about it in interviews, but I fell into it. So I did a chemistry degree at uni. Finished up my degree, came home. So I've always kind of come from the southwest of the UK. So came home to my family home and thought, what's next? I wasn't really sure what to do with my chemistry degree and what that would kind of entail, I guess. So I ended up kind of looking around, and then I saw a job come up at Sun Chemical. They were referencing sort of Pantone. It was to do with the Pantone Live project that they were working on. And I was aware of Pantone. I loved the idea of working in colour, and had always followed the trends in terms of like Pantone Colour of the Year and things like that. Like that's always been an interest to me. So I went, and obviously one of the specifications was to have a chemistry degree. So I went along for the interview, really excited about it. Managed to get the position, and it basically just immersed me into different types of ink technology, different types of printing technology, gravure, flexo, water-based, UV, solvent, everything. And then it kind of all went from there. I worked in wide web corrugated for a bit as well, but then I kind of fell into labels a little bit later on when I was introduced to Gary from Pulsar Label Products. And he offered me a job working there, and obviously they're an ink supplier specifically in narrow web. So that's where I kind of found the label industry, I guess, and it still baffles people to this day when I explain. Obviously, I only work in labels, and that's kind of my industry is labels. So yeah, it's one of those situations where I fell into it, but I absolutely love it, and I think one of my kind of main aims in life is to really shout about the label industry and make people and the packaging industry as a whole, I guess, and make people aware of it and make the younger generation aware of it as a career option for the future.
So you started your career in inks and you've ended up in technical sales. Was there any kind of wiggles in the middle of that, or was it a linear progression for you?
To be honest, it's been one of those things where I've kind of been finding my way and finding where I personally want to sit career-wise. I didn't really think I was cut out for sales, maybe, in the beginning. Obviously, coming from a chemistry background, I like working in the lab, and I like, understanding things and working, at that sort of level. But the more and more I kind of progressed, I've kind of dipped and dabbed into different things, but technical sales, I think, sits right with me because you have that element of meeting with customers, discussing exciting projects with them, also helping them on a much more technical level rather than just kind of a pure sales role when all you're talking about is price and service and things like that. Obviously, when you get more into the technicalities of it, then you can really get involved in what's going on, and that's kind of my science background kind of peeking in there, I guess.
So what has overall, because you've dabbled around obviously with inks and sales and all of that, what has your experience overall been as a young person in the industry?
It was quite tricky to begin with. I think the industry as a whole, first of all, being female as a young person in the industry, I definitely felt, especially in the ink industry, maybe, it was quite challenging. I mean, when I was in the wide web side of things, obviously you're working with 20 kilo pots of ink and things like this on a day-to-day basis. And even in that kind of manual labor aspect, it was difficult for me as well. But kind of, it's been interesting, and I can definitely see the gaps. And I think that's why I'm so passionate about getting the next generation in, because it wasn't incredibly easy for me in the beginning. I don't think. It's not that I didn't have great support from my employers and everybody around me, but when you are a supplier going into a customer sometimes, and you are talking to somebody on press who's maybe been on press for 50 years or however long, and you've got to try and convince them of a different way of working, maybe, or a different process or something new that they have to try. It's quite difficult sometimes, especially having to come in as a young person to try and convince somebody who's been doing it for so long to maybe change their methods or something like that. That was difficult for sure.
And I know you are very involved with the Young Professionals Network. How did you get drawn into that, and what is your role with that now?
So I was started when I was working for Pulse Raw Label Products. It was the MD actually who recommended that I joined. He's very active in Finat, so he said obviously they had this back then it was the Young Managers Club, and the president at the time was Chris Jones. So he had a good relationship with him, and he said, I think you two get on really, really well. Just give him a call. So it was great. Gave Chris a call, and basically he completely convinced me within a sort of half an hour phone call that joining the club and getting involved with the kind of initiatives that they come up with and going to the congresses that they put together would be really beneficial for me and my career and my development. And he was completely right. So I went forward for, I think, the first Congress in Lisbon, I believe it was. I may be getting my dates mixed up slightly. And that's when they started talking about, they obviously had Chris there as the president, but can we discuss, have a much more wider board members and things like that. So that's where I signed up to become a board member. And then the following years, we kind of struggled with attendance and people coming to the events. And I think that's where we kind of thought, right, we need to reinvigorate what was the Young Managers Club. And that's where we discussed changing it to the Young Professionals Network, because we felt the term managers could be quite exclusive of certain, you don't have to be a manager to be able to join in. And then Chris had to, he relocated with Alphasonic over to the US. So he was no longer able to kind of partake within the YPN, the YMC, whatever, which way. He couldn't take part, unfortunately, as much as he wanted to. And I know that really frustrated him, but for his career, he obviously had to move on. So I kind of stepped into the role. I don't like the term president. Personally, I don't like the term president, but I call myself the chief disruptor. That's a term we kind of came up with as a group as well. But the one thing I like about it is that we've got a good board of people, and I don't like it being all my decisions or all my ideas. I really like that there's a group of us that work together on initiatives, on content, on the Congress or the boot camps or things or events we want to put together. We work together, and it's not just me making the decision. So although officially I would, I've been called, the president of the YPN, I really don't think of it like that, because that slightly terrifies me and puts a lot of responsibility on my shoulders, I guess. But, it's more to do with, it's definitely a group effort. Absolutely love it.
So how many years have you been involved with this? It sounds like for a while.
I'm trying to think back of what it was. I want to say at least 2017, maybe 2017. I started getting involved, started going to the events. quickly joined onto the board, had a hand in planning the next few. So yeah, 4 years. I forget, we're in 2021 as well. So yeah, I mean, again, we obviously rebranded as the YPN a few years ago, and obviously through 2020, it's been a horrendously tough year for lots of people. So trying to fit in YPN duties as well as, you know, my full-time job has been difficult. But you know, we have been, you know, keeping in touch with each other. We have a group, WhatsApp group, that we always like to check in and see how everyone's doing. So yeah, it's been good. We had our first meeting of 2021 a few weeks ago, so we're hoping to start all rolling a bit more with some YPM content. Unfortunately, probably no events in person for the foreseeable, but hoping to start something off
Now,
soon.
is this mostly Europe and UK based, or do you have Americans involved with it, or is it regional, global?
It is a European. It is a European based, because it's obviously part of Finat, which is a European based forum. But we do have kind of the odd, you know, participants from different areas of the world. So yeah, it's one of those things that if you're interested in being a part of it, always just send an email, ask, and we'll see what we can do, sort of thing.
That's good to know. So we briefly touched on this, but what do you think was an aspect of the industry that either intimidated you or that you saw as a challenge you needed to overcome when you were entering it?
I think it's that generational disconnect sometimes. Like I said, having to discuss, you know, new technologies with printers or people who have been working in print for so long, and having to come to them with new ideas and new technology and try and explain them and change the way they work and change the way of thinking. That for me was incredibly difficult. And I think for myself as well, I almost generated a little bit of frustration that I wasn't being listened to, etc., etc. But then I needed to learn and grow myself in my professional development and understand that see the struggles from the other side. So try and understand the older generation's, you know, view of, you know, this young person's coming in and telling me that the way I've been working for the past 40 years is inefficient and da 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 da. So it's been a growth pattern for me, definitely, in trying to in understanding the kind of different generational and the way that people work together. So yeah, that's definitely the worst side of it that I found, for sure.
Yeah, and so was overcoming it just a matter of thinking from the other perspective, or how have you found a way to work around that generational gap?
I think it's perseverance, I guess, and not giving up. So not being, you know, I'm here because people feel like I am, you know, capable and competent. You know, I'm doing a job. So I just need to kind of persevere and understand, you know, not take it personally and understand that it is something that is going to be an issue going forward. But like you said, the main way of overcoming it, I think, has been kind of stepping back, trying to reassess the situation. Even some, you know, things as basic as sort of like basic management training, a couple of courses that you can go on and really understand where they touch on different generations and the way that different people work. I mean, we're going to see it much more coming up with, you know, you've got the Gen Zs and the Gen Ys and all the different, you know, the next generation, that I'm going to have to learn how to work with them, and it's going to be exactly the same thing all over again. So it's going to be interesting, but I think understanding why different generations think the way they do, I think that's really helped me in a way, in understanding, you know, why certain things happen in my career.
So speaking of the Gen Y and Gen Z, is Avery doing any type of programs targeted towards younger generations to get them involved? Because I feel like the biggest problem people always have is workforce development with younger generations.
So Avery Dennison have something called the Early Careers Program, which takes people coming straight out of university, and what they can do is kind of do a rotation around different areas of the business. So you go over and do marketing over in Leiden, or you can go up to Cramlington in the UK and work on quality side of things or things like that. But the amount of people, the amount of times I see on LinkedIn all the new kind of ECP associates coming through the business. Obviously, normally I say these things, but I realize now I'm 29 and I need to stop associating myself with people who are like 21, 22. But I see these people coming through the business, and I just think it's so exciting that how excited they are to work in our industry as well. I see a lot of internships coming through Avery as well. So yeah, Avery do a surprising amount, but there is actually a lot going on within Avery Dennison that I wasn't actually necessarily aware of before joining. So obviously it's very refreshing to see now on joining and meeting all these people, just how forward thinking the business is, definitely.
So thinking bigger scale post-pandemic, things are normal.
Oh,
I know.
thank God. I know.
What do you want to see for the future of the labels industry?
I feel like the labels industry in general has been kind of reinvigorated in the past few years by a few different areas. So the first one being sustainability. I definitely see that this kind of, obviously everyone's talking about it as a trend, but I don't believe it to be a trend necessarily. I believe it to be, the future way we're going to work. It's everything's going to want to be sustainable. It's not a trend. It's going to be here from now on in. So for me, that's really exciting. And, just making sure, working with end users, because you've got to consider the whole packaging to really make sure that the label material you are choosing is suitable for recycling purposes, etc., etc. So things like that, I think, are really, really going to be important. And then another kind of angle on it, which is a personal passion of mine as well, is the intelligent labeling side of things. As one of my roles within Avery is to do with RFID. So that's another incredibly exciting, technology I can see becoming more and more part of the label industry. And that's something I'm specifically very, very excited for, because I think the opportunities are just endless. And once it kind of gets adopted more and more, it's just going to be absolutely massive and really could solve a lot of issues we're seeing at the moment.
Yeah. And correct me if I'm wrong, but speaking of sustainability, hasn't Avery just released a linerless recycling program or something along those lines?
Yes, yeah. I didn't want to to become too much of an advert for Avery Dennison, to be honest with you. But yeah, today we released AD Circular. So it's a liner recycling program. It's an idea of basically that we collect liner, not even necessarily Avery Dennison liner. That's one of the points we wanted to make as well. Not necessarily Avery Dennison liner. It could be anybody's liner. And the idea is that we make sure that it gets recycled, and yeah, then it can get made into lots of other different things as well. So yeah, really exciting step for us. I know that the team at Avery have been working on this for what feels like, well, pretty much the whole of 2020. So yeah, it's really great to get it off the ground. And like I said, it's going to be hopefully that next step forward into the circular economy and all the sustainability goals that Avery have, and as us as an industry should have. We should always be promoting this circular economy. So yeah, very exciting announcement today. Yeah.
Well, and I think that on a broader scale, not just at an Avery scale, but the more sustainable this industry becomes, the easier it's going to be to get the younger generations involved, because that's at the top of everyone's mind. Like, we want to make sure that we're taking care of the planet.
Yeah, exactly. And I think there was a bit of a scare amongst the packaging industry for a while, where they were kind of worried that the big plastics debate or things like that were actually going to mean the end for the labeling industry or the end for the packaging industry. And that would never be the case. It's just about rethinking things and trying to do the best that you can, with what you've got. So yeah, I think it's some of the, when you look at kind of the statistics around it, it's something like 80% of Gen Z's would rather buy from a sustainable brand or something along those lines. But the statistics are there to support the fact that we need to really be pushing forward with these types of things for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's exciting to see the progress being made. It's not it's an invigorating industry.
Yeah, definitely. And like I said, it's just kind of come back through again with the sustainability aspect, and then obviously with my personal love for intelligent labeling as well. I do think that there's some really interesting projects that could definitely come from that.
Yeah. I was talking to someone and they said, the labeling industry has something in it for everybody. And I think that that is so true.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, obviously you've got traditional sort of business roles, sales, admin, things like that. But, there's me from a chemistry background, very, very scientific, the amount of engineering I know that goes into press manufacturing, the science that goes into, well, ink development, varnish development, the next generation of kind of sustainable inks and varnishes when you're looking into LED, things like that. There's so many areas. If you're more kind of creatively inclined, obviously you can get in terms with the artistic and the design side of things as well. Yeah, there really is something for everyone. And like I said, I think it may take your time, like it did for me, to kind of find your best fit and where you can kind of really be the best version of yourself. But once you find it, it's so great. It really is great.
Well, thank you so much for joining me today and joining as our next guest on the Young Manager series. It was so lovely to chat with you. And again, thank you for your time, and we look forward to seeing more of you.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate it.